I'm Lisa Eddy, your host of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast, which is now being shared here on YouTube. I hope this episode brought you insights and inspiration to radiate and shine with confidence. Remember to subscribe so you receive new episodes hot off the press right when they are released. And follow me on Instagram for more juicy tips at I am Lisa Eddy. Also, ladies and gentlemen, when you subscribe, like, and share these episodes, it helps me to get seen by more people. And that means a lot to me because I am committed to reaching millions of women across the globe and waking them up to this sacred beauty lifestyle, owning their true power and beauty, both inside and out. Now, more than ever, we need more women shining instead of hiding. When we band together, we are unstoppable. This is how we change the world, together. Remember the sacred beauty lifestyle and get on out there and shine. The world needs your light. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast. I am super excited to share this beautiful, conscious, loving Master Medical Intuitive. Skyler Acamesis is with us today. She is, as I mentioned, a Master Medical Intuitive, creator of medical intuitive technique and cutting edge healing modality, founder of the Medical Intuitive Association, Master Theta Healing instructor, nutritionist, author, and registered hypnotherapist. She has over 20 years of experience working as a spiritual healer, speaker, and facilitator. She is a regular speaker at large international conferences and events. Skylar practices from her online medical intuitive clinic. Her main specialty is medical intuition and wellness business mentoring. She also runs training courses in medical intuition and theta healing at all levels. Without further ado, let me introduce the lovely Skyler Acamesis. Hello, beauty. So happy to be here with you today and to get to share you with the sacred beauty lifestyle.
Hi, beautiful. It's an absolute delight to be here with you.
Yeah, this is going to be juicy. There's so much about you that just lights me up. It was a very natural, easy fit when I came across you. And there is so much that is really in alignment with the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle podcast. However, I bet some of our listeners might be going, hey, wait, what is a medical intuitive? Can you explain this and the technique for our listeners right out the gate?
To put it simply, I believe that we are the power in our bodies and that we are should be able to speak to our bodies exactly the same way that you speak to your angels or to your guides or to God, and that your body should be a vehicle for divine light to be shined out into the world. So I think because I got sick so young, my mission was clear, from a very young age, and remove the obstacles to health manifesting inside people's lives. And medical intuition kind of snuck up on me. I very much, like most people, wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, and I just kept following God's guidance and Course in Miracles, right? Every day, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? And then one day I was just like, this is who I am. And that was it.
Ooh, I would love to hear a little bit more, as I'm sure our listeners would, about your history and a little bit more in depth of what you went through that you pulled the string on.
Gosh, okay. So it's if you met like with me when I was a kid, I was such like in like a type A personality. I was like straight A's across the board, and I played every sport that there was. I wasn't just like in the netball. I was in hockey and in badminton, and I was a competitive swimmer, and everything about me was like, I suppose, like really, really get approval, get approval, get approval. And that really led to burnout at the tender age of 10. And I didn't know what was happening to me. I had these bruises appearing all over my body. And I remember telling my mom, I can't get up in the morning. I have no energy. And because I was so young, it took them over a year to diagnose me with an underactive thyroid. And by then, it had actually caused dyslexia because I had such less oxygen going to my brain for such a long period of time. Because thyroxine is responsible for carrying oxygen, right, to different parts of the body. Untreated hypothyroidism can really lead to like retardation, all sorts of mental problems and learning disorders. And it took them a long time to figure out I had it. But because I was swimming, and you and I touched on this before, the chlorine was really stripping my body of iodine. So that's how it manifested. But from a metaphysical perspective, thyroid is all about not being able to speak your truth. And I was all about trying to get love through being perfect. I had no idea how to be loved for who I was, and I couldn't even communicate it. So it makes sense that my thyroid, was the part of my body that was speaking louder than everything else, right? Because I was brave enough to be who everybody else wanted me to be, but I wasn't brave enough to be myself. I had no clue who I was. And illness has a way of really not just making you compassionate, but bringing you down to earth very quickly, and especially when you hear, like, I remember going to the GP and finally getting the diagnosis. And part of it is a relief because you're like, oh God, I finally know what's wrong and I'm not crazy. But the other part is like, they said they couldn't fix it. They said it's going to stop me from having normal kids. And I'm probably not ever going to have children. They said I'm going to have to be on medication for the rest of my life and I can't fix this. And that's a lot for a 10-year-old to take in. Right. And I know there's lots of kids that have much more serious illnesses at a younger age, but that was my wake up call because something in me refused. It was like, no, there has to be more than this. Even then, my mom says I argued with the doctor and I was like, no, I don't remember it. It's just like when you go into shock, your memory kind of goes. I remember being dropped off at the gym because that's where I always, playing sports and things. I remember being dropped off back at school about half an hour afterwards in tears, thinking I'm never going to have kids. I'm never going to have a normal life, and trying to process the loss of my health, right? Something I'd taken for granted my whole life. And it wasn't until I was 17 that I had my spiritual awakening. And it was exactly because I was constantly sick and constantly tired. And I was also very overweight, which you wouldn't believe to look at me now. And I remember finally saying to the universe, if there's something out there, help me, because whatever this is, I can't get out of the other side on my own. And to cut a long story short, my boyfriend at the time, his dad was a spiritual healer, and I had an out of body experience, and I could see him doing healing work. And he could see me having the out of body experience, which was very surreal. I didn't even know what an out of body experience was back then. But he offered me a healing session and I just went pop. And from that day, I went from being like a muggle to like being able to see the angels and auras. And it's like the download just came in. And there was no going back. I remember my mom going like, who are you and what have you done with my daughter? It was just like game over. new game. Like whatever game existed before. New person. So that was me like very firmly on the spiritual path. And then the more I studied metaphysics, the more I studied Course in Miracles. I mean, it didn't take a year for my health to be completely restored. It didn't. And for people can feel that. And that's partly why I got into Theta. When people can feel that you got healthy, they start coming because there's something in you that's like a vibrational match, to the answers that they've been looking for. And it started building momentum. I remember being I'm such a country girl, which is hilarious for someone that spent 10 years in London, but I am like cows and sheeps, and I really am. I'm like, one with the Snow White syndrome. I can talk to the animals, baby. It's like just where I am. But my guidance was moved to London, and I was like, no, I'm not moving to this like massive big smoke concrete thing, right? No. And the universe finds a way. So I go to an angel retreat and end up meeting my to-be husband, who I've now been with for 11 years, and he happens to live in London. And my grandparents, who live in Brazil, happen to visit me and make me go to meet them in London. And in London, when I'm meeting my grandparents and kind of thinking, should I stay here? Should I be with, my hubby? Is this serious when you're in that stage of the relationship? I got invited to do a talk for Linen Cauldron Spirituality, and that was it. That was my, like, that's where I started really teaching and teaching, every week for the next, I'll probably be teaching every week for the next 11 years.
Wow. What a story. And you were so young to
Really,
have
really young,
such
yeah.
an intense experience. Clearly, it's interesting. Like clearly that was your life path. Like, that you came here to make big impact, that you were able to hold high levels of, light and healing. And it's just so interesting how we often have to go through this ourselves. I'm sure you see that in your work. Do you see that where people who are very gifted and have a big mission or imprint on their heart to heal the world? Why is that? We have to go through so much.
What I've seen systemically, like you said, everybody, is that the most powerful light workers tend to go the deepest into the mud. It's kind of like where you plant the lotus flower, right? And it's so that when we shoot up, we'll take the most number of souls with us, because when you're deep, you're not just, and people do like root therapy. I do root systems. I'm like, screw one root. What tree has one root? What plant has one root? Every plant has thousands of roots. So when you really think about breaking down entire fear systems, it makes sense that we have to go deep. And that then I think if you imagine emotions, particularly love and compassion and suffering, you know, if you imagine it like rain, like sadness is like rain on the earth, it softens that mud. And then when you pull the plant or whatever system it was that was holding that suffering in place for humanity, the whole thing comes out. I think that's what happens when we pop. We go like really deep into that darkness, and then we go boom, and the whole thing comes out because we've softened everything around us. And it's just, you can, like gardeners, they pour water on the plant before they suck it out. I think that's what we're like.
I love that explanation, and I also love that you brought in the lotus flower, because for those of you listening, I'm not sure if you're aware, the lotus flower represents the highest level of spiritual consciousness and evolution. And this flower comes from the muck, like comes this strong, radiant, beautiful flower. This was the name of my first skincare business, was Lotus Skin and Body
Wow.
Care at 27. And I was in for such a journey of spiritual evolution myself, as were those who were coming to see me through that business. So thank you for bringing that piece in. And I also wonder if you can explain, when you said screw root therapy, I do root systems. Can you explain what that means for our listeners?
When I first started to work, particularly with hypnosis, because that's, my first experiments with meditation, I was just listening to the Doreen Virtue, past life regression and angel therapy long ago, when I was awakening to my own energy centers and communicating with my angels. And I realized that if I did it one trauma at a time, that I was going to be there a very long time. And the biggest reason for that was because when I had my spiritual awakening, I wasn't just remembering like childhood experiences. And most human therapy is geared towards just inner child work. But what happened when I had my spiritual awakening was every night I was remembering a different lifetime. And I had no control over what was coming up. And I remember my spiritual teacher at the time was like, don't hold on to any of it. It's just being cleared. Every time it comes, let it go. And it's like, I can't, how am I supposed to have a different life every night? And then, bing, what do you need the next morning? This is like, I'm a human person. What do you mean? Just let it go. And, wise old people.
It's so simple, but you're like, but wait, can you break it down?
And then they're like, it's just acceptance. You just have to, witness it and release it. There's nothing that you have to do except allow God to do the work, right? But me in my innocence, I didn't really have a deep connection with Creator then. I had a deep connection with my angels. My connection with God would grow, right? My connection with my angels was like there from the start, and then it grew into a deep love of the divine. But I was highly suspicious of anything divine because of all the religious trauma that I had. It was insane. But like when we were dealing with roots, like it was 300 lifetimes, and I wasn't even touching the tip of the iceberg at what needed to be resolved for me to be able to be whole. And it really started to become, I then started to move into take me to like the original wound, which is, and I now know is where the shamans used to work. And that must have come from my lifetimes doing shamanic work. Like take me to the original life, take me to the original archetype, as it were. But then I realized that the archetypes basically represented root systems, stories we'd all lived, pain we'd all been through, and not just one belief, a series of belief, or like a river of beliefs in a giant woven tapestry of a much bigger story than us, right? Which it represents the wheel of reincarnation. So when I was looking at particularly diseases, because in the beginning, I don't know why, maybe it was my dharma, or maybe it was because I had lost my adolescence to disease. I was really into, how do I dissolve this? Where does this come from? And I started to realize that every disease had a system. It wasn't just one belief at all. It was always a system. And that I was going to have to figure out what that root system was and how it served before I was going to be able to dissolve it. And that even now, when I do most therapies or when I work with people, they're stuck in a mire of one trauma at a time. And it just doesn't go fast enough. You have to look at the whole system. It's like trying to take down a tree by pulling out one root at a time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, there's so much beauty and depth in what you are sharing here, and that many of us have these experiences of many traumas, and then the process being too slow. I love that you shared that. I also love that you brought in that it was your dharma, because you don't hear that as much. On a spiritual journey I went on to Peru, gosh, back in 2016, and I met one of my now teachers, an Incan elder. He shared the truth about dharma and karma with me, and I have an episode here, I can't remember the number offhand, that I titled The Truth About Karma on this podcast, The Sacred Bee Lifestyle. And I think dharma is not completely understood or talked about as much. It's my understanding that when you do good deeds, when you do and put good out in the world, that you are blessed in return, that the gods bless you. When you bless, you're blessed. So is that what you were referring to with your dharma?
Yes, and gifts are mysterious things. So
Mm.
one of the things obviously, if trauma can be passed from generation to generation, then so can light, right? And these gifts, whether, like I said, it's the gift of prophecy or the gift of healing, which is one of the most powerful gifts that we have, it's passed from generation to generation to generation. And even biblically, if you track, like the ancestral lines of some of the greatest ascended masters that have walked the earth, these gifts were passed through people for generation to generation and strengthened, right? So people talk about intergenerational trauma. We're talking about intergenerational blessings. Um, Intergenerational activations that were designed to, like you said, wipe suffering off the face of the earth. People have been dreaming about the end of disease since fear was born, you know, and that dream has to have a culmination somewhere. It's the same thing. People have been dreaming about the end of poverty. They've been dreaming about the end of racism, sexism, fear, period. They've been dreaming about the end of suffering. And that dream is a blessing, So every time we pass it forward, we're the love of not screw thousands, we're the love of billions. And when we really step into that space, like when we talk about dharma, if I think about like my dad, he's an orthopedic surgeon and he spent his whole life, working towards healing others too. And a huge part of my, I suppose, subconscious library comes from his DNA. So much of our dharma, yes, it's the blessings because of good things we did in other lives, but karma doesn't just work against you. Karma works for you and for the whole of humanity, right? It can be an act of, like you said, trepidation because you have to face the darkness, but it can also be an act of grace because it can literally compound the light that's been carried within you. It's amazing that you will choose the same karmic wheel to incarnate into the family that will most help you become the light you're supposed to be for the world.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. You
Yes.
bring out
No.
something in me, girl.
No, I bring it. This is the time. This is the truth. This is what is needed. There is so much pain and suffering and fear is fostered. And that is how we control. You want to control a bunch of people, you scare the crap out of them, right? And so the opposite is quite welcome here. I don't subscribe to fear. And I think that your message is very important. That's why you're here. So bring it. And you're
I
right.
haven't had this type of conversation in a very long time. I'm really enjoying
Oh,
myself.
is that why you said I bring something out in you?
You do, because normally, even when I come, I'm by nature a very honest person, but I'm also, if you think about a light, if you shine it too brightly, you can dazzle, or you can even like blind someone if someone like shines their blitzers on you, right? So I'm always very gentle, the best that I can be, because the truth's such a powerful thing, and light's such a powerful thing. But it's such a nice, not just nice, it's so beautiful to just be able to completely, it feels like, I don't have to hold anything back. It's just really whatever comes and it can be held. It's a beautiful space.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. And we do pick up the torch of our ancestors. It's so funny that you brought the ancestors in. Not sure exactly when this episode is going to be aired at the moment. It could be in December 2022. However, I know we are recording this in November 2022, and we just celebrated Dia de los Muertos, like the Day of the Dead, the time that the veil is thinner and we have more access to our ancestors so that we can tap into that wisdom. And I celebrated that in Mexico, where it's really highly regarded and honored. And even I was in Teotihuacan, which is the city of the gods, is what it's called, and where the Toltec, thrived for 5,000 years. So steeped in light and wisdom and ancestral, knowledge and love that they want to pass on to us. So when we are open to receive it, right? And so maybe share, what would you say would be, for those of listening who are like, what does this mean? How do I get in on this? What is my family lineage light or gift? How do I open to it? So do you have a recommendation or a suggestion to opening up to the light and wisdom that is in your lineage so that you can help turn this ship around and light it up?
I think particularly in Western culture, there is a very conscious and deliberate attack on families, both through the media and through, even through spirituality. There's this real idea that everybody that came before us was retarded, right? And the focus is on your mom gave you your trauma, your dad gave you your trauma, your ancestors give you your trauma. There's this real focus on isolating us from our family unit, right? But if you look at the containers that contain the most wealth on the planet, it's not companies, it's not even politicians, it's families. The wealthiest vehicles on the earth, the vehicles with the most power is family systems. So it makes sense that we're constantly disconnected from our own family system, and not just through the media, but through shame, like I believe. Because if you're not proud of your ancestors or proud of your parents, if you can only see their flaws, then you're not proud of yourself, because you're half of them. And you know that you are. Even if you have spiritual parents or soul parents, you chose your blood family for a reason, right? So it's very like you said, convenient that the powers that be, they know that the more you feel disconnected from your family, the more vulnerable that you are, right? And it's psychologically proven that when you don't allow a child or an adult to talk to a family member, that they will take on, this is family, not just family systems therapy, but family constellations work, that person will take on the unresolved trauma of the person they're not allowed to communicate with or mention. So that's his like proper social work recognized stuff, which is why they no longer recommend completely cutting off parents and teens and children, even if the parents are abusive. So I think that the family is a field, and that you weren't just given the gifts of a few members of your family. You carry the gifts of all the members of your family in your DNA. You are given all of them. And it's very funny because, like, for example, I am a tech retard and I'm not that good at math, but I can tell my son is going to be incredible at both, and my father is incredible at both. So these gifts can come through you and not be of you, as it were, right? You're like that conduit, as opposed to necessarily the manifestation of each of those gifts. But the first stage is very simple. You have to make a decision that you're going to love the family field. Even if you can't love individual members, you're going to pour love back into the field.
Mm.
And then the next is to invite it to share with you uh, the beauty that's within you. Because most people are so scared, like they're like, if I look inside my family tree, they go in there because of all this trauma programming, looking for their traumas. They never go in there looking for the light. And the family field is a living thing, just like the body is a living thing. If I try and do a body scan on someone when I'm doing medical intuitive work, and I go in from a place of judgment or fear, that person's energy goes boom, boom, boom. You can't see anything. Your psychic vision becomes lost because their body knows that you're an invader and you're not a good one, right? You're coming from a place of fear. So it's already like, get out. You shouldn't be here. I don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
The family field is very much the same. Families are vulnerable. They have secrets and, intimate moments. And they're a space of very much raw creation and self-exploration and without rules, or very much like like the womb where we're figuring out who we are as opposed to who we think we are and who we want to be. So when you go into the family field, if you go in with the energy of judgment and looking for trauma, then that is all you'll find. That's all you'll see. If you look for darkness, that's what you'll find. But if you go in and you ask it to show you what it can do, to show you the beauty that's in there, it will take your breath away. you know, every single person, even the ones that like effed up the most, have incredible gifts. God doesn't put people on this planet by mistake. Everybody came here for a reason. And Carl Jung was the one that said our biggest subconscious driving force is the unlived lives, right, of our parents. And I believe it's the unlived dreams of our ancestors. It's the people that came that never got to shine their light, and it was supposed to be cumulatively given to humanity. Sorry.
Oh no, that was so moving. You brought me to tears. Wow, that is so powerful and so true. And yes, I feel that. Oof, I feel that with my own lineage. Like my mother was so gifted and didn't realize the gifts, or she is. She's still here, but she hasn't really fully owned her gifts still. I can see them now, and I have been able to for several years now. And I'm the one who embodies most of the light in the family, that sees the power of my mother, that sees her gifts, that is bringing forth this wisdom. Like she was incredibly intuitive, skills that or gifts that weren't as highly regarded as like Western medicine, traditional education systems, where as when we are actually able to tap in and access the ancestral wisdom via our intuition, we have a direct link to truth and knowing that is instantaneous and available to all of us. And I think it's totally underestimated and not valued as much, the intuition piece. Would you, do you have anything to add to that? Or
Oh, I completely agree with everything you said. That intuition is, I believe it's the literacy of this century. I think it's I think that we are intuitively illiterate. And that's part of why there's such a push now, I think, the armies of light, as it were, to cultivate the literacy of our own, because it's the way that we bring enlightenment, right? Is to tap into that knowledge. And intuition is the definition of looking inside for light and knowledge. So I can't be in that space where I look at the previous generation of women without honoring the sacrifices they made for us. Because, like you said, they were so badly silenced, and this idea that they're not just their intuition, but their gifts were worthless, and that they had nothing to give is still so prevalent, right, in women today. But that they gave us that light anyway, and that we're actually able to shine ours. But that's giving something you didn't get. It's a pretty impressive miracle. One, the
wow.
psychologists are still really determined that it doesn't exist, but I see it every day.
Wow. Okay, so I want to back up for our listeners. You said that they can tap into the family to look for the light. Just because some may be at different levels, and what does tapping in mean to some? Like, would you suggest starting with a journaling? Is that hypnotherapy, a different modality. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
I always say begin where you are, right? All of us
Mm,
are different. And the same way that we have different learning styles, we have different ways that we connect with spirit. So, if journaling is it for you, then begin by writing. If singing is it for you, begin by singing. If meditation is it for you, begin by meditating. Hypnosis is just, westernized word for meditation. And deep trance. We took this is what we do. We took the idea of, trance from Indian and Hindu culture and from the shamanic, and we were like, oh, we'll just call it hypnosis. Poor Freud was high on cocaine when he came up with that idea. And, you shouldn't read our history, really. It's quite embarrassing.
yeah. Wait,
Right?
but there's light in there too. I'm being silly.
There's a lot of light in there. We're very, like, I've never seen a culture that's faster at us than adapting, but oh my God, are we a bit convinced that we made things up that have been around for a long time? But
Right.
this is the thing. This is what I think is the crux of gifts, is that I think because maybe we're like, well, I'm in Britain, I'm in a tiny island. Maybe because, Britain is like a tiny island. There's this idea of like there not being enough space for everybody to be a light, and they're not being in need for everybody to be a light, And I think that's what intuition dissolves, is that there's space for everybody in the rainbow, and there's a reason everybody has the light that they have. And not only is it required, I mean, it is necessary. If all of us switched on right now, it would still be, a fast-paced thing to resolve the mess that we're in. But yeah, like I said, there's a very strong belief that our intuition is, like you said, there has to be one way. There isn't one way. There's never one way. God always gives us a million ways to get home.
Yeah. Thank you. I know you used another word for God. I think you said source or the divine. And I know that not everyone resonates with the word God. And so I want to bring this in because you did. Thank you. And I just want to elaborate a little bit more because of religion, sort of. I don't even know how I want to explain this, but religion really distorting the truth about source, God, creator, for power over, I think it's left a bad taste in a lot of our mouths. And certainly in mine, it took me years being a recovered Catholic school student, though the dogma actually never stuck. Catholicism never resonated with me, though I was around it. It took me a long time to realize it doesn't matter what you call it, it's all the same. God, source, universe, light, divine, creator, spiritual, like there's many words,
Mm-hmm.
so whatever you want to call it. I just wanted to bring that in so that it was not a turn off, so that perhaps someone didn't miss the beauty in the words and wisdom that you're sharing because the word God doesn't resonate. So interchange that with whatever you'd like, just as Skylar said, whatever is your modality, same idea, whether it's writing or chanting or singing or walking or moving meditations, even, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that in. Thank you.
No, I hear you. There's so much religious trauma. It's not even a joke. And
Yeah.
it does massively trigger people. But like we just discussed about family, exactly because our connection to God is such a big part of us being whole and resilient, like our bounce back factor. So I think they hit hard in that direction for a reason.
Thank you. Agreed. Ooh, so much beauty that has been shared here today with you already in this short time. I feel like you and I could have sequels.
Go on adventures through the multiverse.
Right? We might start a show together. No. uh, I wonder if you have anything else you'd like to share, any other tips that you'd like to share with somebody sort of curious about the medical intuitive piece, or that's perhaps struggling in their physical body, they're unclear, they're uncomfortable, and they don't know what to do?
I think, gosh, when you say that, I can feel the people listening.
Mm.
So I'm just going to bring in Archangel Raphael, if that's okay.
Please.
I think you've got some people who are really afraid that they're never going to get better. So that's the first thing is I if you'll let me, I'll bring you hope, right? Because your body is for you, not against you. And it's been fighting for your life since before you were consciousness. It is very much on your side. And even if it's in a lot of pain right now, I promise that it can always, always, always get better. It may not be the traditional way. You may have to go your own way. We talked about there being a million ways. There's a million ways, but the path is the same. It's always a path of love, right? So if you're when it comes to connecting with your, like you said, is there one thing you would say from the rooftops? It's that love is the power in your body, not the pills, not the supplements, not somebody else. You know, love is the power in your body. And until you put love on the throne, there will always be pain somewhere, right? Because the absence of love creates pain. If you imagine taking a little baby away from its mother and it's screaming, we're the same. If you take us away from love, we naturally go into a state of pain and fear. So the first step is to kind of put love on the throne in your body and be like, okay, I'm not going to use, so keep it really clear. In Course in Miracles, it talks about body identification. What does that mean? It means that when we are disconnected from our higher power, we start believing that we are the body. And when this happens, we start running all of our thoughts, everything through the body. And the body is a vehicle for light. It's not supposed to be a vehicle for the mind. Right? And when the mind is, especially if the mind is anxious and it's stuck inside the body, or the mind is angry and it's stuck inside the body, that's when disease starts to manifest. And you can see all the ancient traditions, whether it's Chinese medicine or Indian medicine, can literally tell you what kind of a mind you have and how that manifests disease when it's trapped inside the body. The reason that a return to love will pull you out of that state of pain is because you will no longer be putting all of your mind in your body, because you will know that not only are you not your body, you are not your mind. You are infinite divine light. And once that lie that you are the body or the mind is gone, your body will return to health, because that's its original state. So that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about medical intuition. There isn't, you can trust me, I've had everything under the sun, from people talk to me about biohacking to hormones to, at the end of the day, all pain is manifest from fear. And sometimes you have a plant or a supplement, and I'm, like I said, I'm a nutritionist. I believe in the power of diet and nutrition, but it's all consciousness. And sometimes a plant can teach you something, sometimes a crystal can teach. Everything has knowledge and wisdom, but ultimately you're going to have to take your power back. Right? You're going to have to remember that your power comes from that connection with the divine, and that I really believe that being intuitive is the capacity to literally connect with that divine light within you and go, what would you have me do? And that will will literally tell you what your unique journey is, because your body is not the same as mine. My journey to health will never be the same as yours. And that's why I created Medical Intuitive, because the whole idea of Western medicine, and I'm deeply grateful for all types of medicine, right? I promise I don't come from this space of competition, or I really don't. But I really believe that this idea that pathologizing all the body's communication mechanisms as disease is very unhealthy for us, and it keeps us in that victim consciousness. This idea that we are a machine, and that, you know, you can just replace parts, and it not only doesn't work, it causes us a tremendous amount of suffering. So when we're talking about intuition, we're looking at who you are and how you got separated from that, and how that then means that you are in emotional and psychic pain. And that emotional and psychic pain in the consciousness is manifesting as physical or mental pain through mental illness in the body. And then you work on dissolving those.
Beautiful. That was such a beautiful and complete explanation of how we manifest pain physically in the body, to give our listeners an understanding of how they can perhaps begin to unravel or turn that around. Thank you. There's several things that you said made me think of Marianne Williamson, and I don't know if it was intentional, but she studied A Course in Miracles. Then you mentioned A Return to Love. She has that book, A Return to Love, which is absolutely phenomenal. And you mentioned earlier something about like we're all meant to shine, and that is one of my favorite quotes from her is we're all meant to shine as children do. So,
I am addicted. I was actually, I think I was addicted to Marianne for 15 years or so, but she's the one that got me into Course in Miracles. She kind of transitioned me from Angel. She used to come and do talks in London, at
ah,
Alternatives. So I really was inspired, like you said, because you need it. Paths. What I find is a lot of people sabotage their spiritual journey because they won't commit to one path long enough to develop any kind of integrity, right? So when our shadow comes up, we find out we switch to another path or switch to another path instead of applying the principles we've been taught on one path to solve a problem. And that's how we build that spiritual resilience. But for me, because like you, I'd been through a lot of religious trauma. At that point, I wasn't ready to turn to like the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. I tried, but there was just too much trauma for me there. And Course in Miracles took me back to all those books and showed me their beauty in a massive way. But for me, the Course was my vehicle. And Marianne was my cheerleader, even though she probably didn't had no clue that I even existed. I think she signed a couple of books for me, and I went to a lot of her events. And she's, oh my god, she actually did a demonstration with me and my hubby once when we went to like one of her relationship programs. So I did get to know her a bit better. But yeah, it's like you said, it's a woman in power from a place of spiritual love, who wasn't afraid of being vulnerable, who wasn't pulling any punches about actually breaking down how do I apply spiritual principles when the shit hits the fan, right? When everything is down and you really have to, it's the grit and the grace, and you're going to have to get through things, as opposed to like highfalutin theories of just love and how do you actually apply love. So yeah, she was a very big inspiration for me for a long time.
same. I also love the way she explains miracles because sometimes a miracle can even be related to religion when we hear the word miracle. And her explanation is so simple and easy to comprehend is that a miracle is simply a shift in perspective,
Yeah.
right? So I wanted to bring that in because, again, I think sometimes we have these associations that can be blocks for us because Lord knows I had them too.
But I think that was like one of the most powerful things as well. It's what I am such, and I think you are too, from the way that you talk and how much you study and how much you travel and how many people you serve, right? I'm such an action taker. And sometimes I'm really about when I'm really about getting my divine guidance and getting shit done. And so much of, spiritual stuff is it takes a long time and you have to get to the root, and whereas miracles is like bam, instant and sorted. And sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes, like I said, you don't have loads of time. You have to get it now. And it's that grace of connecting with the divine mind and letting God carry you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that in and sort of full circle there. It has been such a pleasure to get to spend this time with you, to learn more about you, to feel you, and to share you with the incredible Sacred Beauty Lifestyle podcast listeners. Where can our listeners find you?
Oh, okay. So literally SkylerAcamesis.com. That's the website. I am live every day, Monday to Thursday, on my YouTube channel and Facebook groups, so you can't miss me. I'm always doing angel readings from 1 until 2 GMT time. So you'll find me there and you can ask a ton of questions and they're all free. And yeah, that's how you can find me.
Oh, lovely. You'll see me there. I want to attend one of those. I'll have to do the time translation later to work that out. Seriously, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. So, you know where to find this lovely one. And it has been, yes, an absolute blessing. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your light and for doing the work that it takes to have evolved into where you are now to serve at a really high level.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, it was. I was so nervous, and it's been such a long time since I've done anything, that's not like actually physically being in the room. So thank you. You've not just been the perfect person, but you are a force to be reckoned with.
I will take that compliment. Thank you. I'm Lisa Eddy, your host of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle podcast, which is now being shared here on YouTube. I hope this episode brought you insights and inspiration to radiate and shine with confidence. Remember to subscribe so you receive new episodes hot off the press right when they are released. And follow me on Instagram for more juicy tips at I am Lisa Eddy. Also, ladies and gentlemen, when you subscribe, like, and share these episodes, it helps me to get seen by more people. And that means a lot to me because I am committed to reaching millions of women across the globe and waking them up to the sacred beauty lifestyle, owning their true power and beauty, both inside and out. Now, more than ever, we need more women shining instead of hiding. When we band together, we are unstoppable. This is how we change the world, together. Remember the sacred beauty lifestyle and get on out there and shine. The world needs your light.